Scene two, Jeffrey Reel, lecture. Roll 'em. Hi there. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Reel. I live in Vermont at the moment in the United States. And I general manager of a food co-op in Rutland. And I've been practicing macrobiotics since about 1980. Health did not bring me to macrobiotics. I'd been searching for answers on hunger, the nature of hunger, why we feel hunger. Frankly, macrobiotics answered a lot of those questions. And how I got into it is a lecture in itself. It came through Frankie Moore-LePay when I was volunteering for her in San Francisco. There was actually a negative reference to macrobiotics because she said, unlike all the other alternative diets, that one alone discourages dairy. And then a light goes on in my head and I go, that's it. That's
I had the same introduction. I know almost no one. Francis Moore-LePay was my entrance. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. We have her to thank. And then I lived with Micho and Aveline for a while in the mid-90s. But instead of chatting about me, I've tried to condense an hour and a half lecture into 45 minutes. So it's going to be pretty frenetic, and I apologize for that beforehand. But let me share this screen with you. I don't know what this is going to look like. Oops. Hold on. Why? Okay, can you all see that? Hello?
No.
Not yet.
The nature. This is about the nature and myth of side effects. So in practicing the macrobiotic diet, and most other diets for that matter, we often frame them in terms of the side effects of foods that adversely impact our health. But talking about side effects isn't restricted to the foods we eat. We talk about them in terms of burning fossil fuels, prescription meds, industrial farming, and in terms of the side effects they produce. But this really flies in the face of natural law. Nature actually doesn't recognize the existence of side effects at all. All effects in nature are considered its main effects. So our belief that side effects exist undermines our assumptions about how best to approach our health and climate change and diet. And those assumptions always lead us astray. Instead, what we do is we adopt an adversarial approach to problem solving. And so we frame solutions in words like the war on hunger, the battle against diabetes, heart disease, etc. So I'd like to explore the nature of side effects in diet, medicine, burning of fossil fuels, industrial farming in a different way. And I want to look at macrobiotic principles through a slightly different lens. But before starting with prescription medications, I'd like to set down a basic principle that serves as a guidepost in this presentation. Humans, we're analytical. Nature is not. So bear with me. There's a bit of chatter here until we move a little bit more swiftly through the presentation. So physiology, botany, physics, like taking a hammer to a rock. We shatter our world into pieces and study the individual shards, chemistry, biology, nutrition. We compartmentalize because in order to study a subject, we have to distinguish it from everything else. But these really are arbitrary boundaries that we establish for the sake of study. And then we go and do the same with our personal and social problems. Degenerative disease, industrial pollution, problems associated with modern agriculture, human health. We see them, we treat them as distinct, separate concerns. But again, the borders we construct around our problems are also artificial and arbitrary. These are mental parameters, not physical ones that we can adjust at will. And then, of course, to compound the picture, the problems of the world are speared into our homes through television, computers, smartphones, which broadens our exposure to natural and man-made disasters. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but here in the United States, personally, I'm then besieged with requests for financial support from foundations seeking to address specific concerns from American Cancer Society, American Lung Association, Alzheimer's Foundation, then the special interest groups defending rainforests, dolphins, whales. I then carefully select my concerns from among this menu of challenges where I can place my efforts, donate $1 here and there, hoping it does some good somewhere at some point in time. and having to allow all the other causes and all the other concerns to slip kind of uneasily into the background noise of my life. So for me personally, it's never been that any one problem seems insurmountable. It just seems that all of them together can feel overwhelming, and I can end up feeling pretty insignificant in the face of it all. The good news is that although we compartmentalize our problems and we create the illusion that they're separate and distinct, requiring separate and distinct solutions, nature does not. Natural laws are invisible, they're weightless, timeless patterns of behavior. They work in tandem. That's to say, they never work in opposition to each other like, say, legislated laws often do. And most importantly, they make up just one force that infuses all of creation. As humans, we unthread this fabric for the purpose of applying different principles to our different areas of our life, our inventions, our machinations, but they make up just one force. When natural laws are correctly understood and applied, a plurality of physical, environmental, even social ills respond favorably and spontaneously to the same corrective measures. And I will keep returning to this. This theme plays out in all areas I'll be discussing today. Philosopher, inventor, visionary Walter Russell, and it's dated, he refers to man instead of people, so forgive me in advance. He wrote that everything created by man first exists as a universal principle that's perfect in nature, but then it ends up being imperfectly worked out by man. Our present-day technologies, ag practices, prescription meds, diets are all based upon natural principles imperfectly worked out by us. Those technologies and ag practices and meds and diets are easy to recognize because they produce what we mistakenly view as side effects. Climate change, degenerative disease are the accumulation of side effects from our imperfect technologies, agricultural practices, and diets. So we have to perfect our technologies, ag practices, prescription meds, and diets, and we are. And as we do this, we discover again that a plurality of side effects respond favorably and spontaneously to the very same corrective measures, which means we don't have to battle against the very forces in nature that support us. We simply need to shift our point of view. So let's begin with prescription meds. In 2020 in the United States, 315,000 pharmacists, 88,000 retail drugstores dispensed 4.5 billion prescriptions to more than 260 million Americans, covering about 50 billion pills at a cost of about $350 billion. Now, when I was growing up, 50 years ago, television ads were about medicine and cough drops. And really, that was basically it. The little fellow on the left is the iconic Speedy Alka-Seltzer character, which was an advertising coup. Conventional medical theory posits. Oh, so today though, okay, that was 50 years ago. Today, the airwaves are dominated by commercials for prescription meds, mostly with potentially, seriously, even deadly side effects. Now, conventional medical theory posits there are main effects and side effects of medications. Again, side effects are not to be found anywhere in nature. All effects should be thought of as main effects. And all effects of a drug should be considered its main effects as well, exerting major influences on the body and impacting our health. So I went online to find a typical prescription antidepressant and its list of so-called side effects. Now, I want to say at the outset that this isn't a damning judgment against all meds. I mean, they're really quite effective at times, and they're needed at certain points in people's lives, especially during crisis intervention. And it's the same with antidepressants. But with antidepressants, I find much more promising the therapeutic use of mushrooms and microdosing with psychedelics, which is now undergoing study, and I feel will find incredible use among the general population, people with PTSD, even prisoners. But I chose a random drug for antidepressant, and it's called Rexulti. In medication, side effects are considered a necessary evil to be endured for the greater good of the body while combating a particular disease or illness. So here are the so-called side effects from taking this one randomly chosen antidepressant. Increased death in elderly people who live with symptoms of dementia. Increased risk of suicidal thoughts and actions, including children. And it just always boggles my mind that we take an antidepressant that creates risk of suicidal thoughts. Stroke. Uncontrolled body movements, where you lose control of your face, tongue, and other body parts. And by the way, according to the manufacturer, these symptoms may never go away, even after you stop taking the drug. Increased fat levels and weight gain. Unusual and compulsive urges, including compulsive gambling, sexual urges, shopping, binge eating. Low white blood cell count, seizures or convulsions. Problems controlling your body temperature, so they ask that if you're taking this medication, you want to stay in a cool place if possible. Good luck with that. Difficulty swallowing, which can cause food or liquid to get into your lungs. And as a disclaimer, it adds, these are not all the possible side effects of Rexulti. So ask your doctor if Rexulti is right for you. It's a lovely family, by the way. They've controlled their weight, they're happy. These are not the people who are taking Rexulti. In addition, you can be certain that these so-called side effects will require the administration of other powerful prescription meds over time. And the interactions of these drugs are basically limitless. Further side effects will cascade from these prescriptions. Physical and emotional problems multiply, spiral out of control. Eventually, we lose the ability to even recognize the causes of our original symptoms, relegating ourselves to passive participants in our own recovery. And sadly, too often, it's really not about recovery at all, but simply disease management. Now, people often begin practicing holistic diet and lifestyle after having been diagnosed with one specific, often serious illness. But rarely are they experiencing just that one physical difficulty. They might also be suffering with such symptoms as low back pain, often indicating kidney problems, skin rashes, fitful sleep, poor appetite, inflammation, depression. Most people then adapt themselves to living with these symptoms, believing them to be either simply part of the aging process or of minor consequence when compared to the more serious diagnosis. The beauty of holistic lifestyle practices is that as we change our diet and lifestyle, many symptoms will begin to diminish across the board simultaneously. The whole body responds favorably to the exact same corrective measures. Rashes diminish, sleep deepens, appetite returns, back pain subsides, energy levels can increase. These are the side effects, if you will, of holistic lifestyle and dietary practices. Again, coming back to Walter Russell, everything created by man first exists as a universal principle, which is perfect in nature and imperfectly worked out by man. Let's look at just one example of energy production and the nature of side effects. I give you the leaf. So through photosynthesis, leaves transmute carbon dioxide, water, sunlight into carbohydrates and energy. No side effects, and the only waste we could consider from the process of photosynthesis is oxygen. So the production of energy imperfectly worked out by man. There's evidence indicating that we domesticated fire about 1.5 million years ago. Ever since time, we've relied on combustion-based technology, wood, coal, oil, gas, to heat our dwellings, cook our food, then heat, cool, electrify our homes and businesses, drive our machinery, and propel our vehicles. The so-called side effects of combustion-based technology is pretty well known now. They include, but not limited to, land degradation, loss of critical wildlife habitat, water pollution, acid runoff from coal mining, and the use of almost 10 million gallons of water per well for its 1 million active wells, and turning the wastewater containing heavy metals, radioactive materials, and other pollutants and releasing it back into our waterways. And then, of course, the toxic emissions produced by the extraction, transportation, processing of fossil fuels. And it goes on. Global warming from the burning of fossil fuels. Coal-fired power plants generate 42% of the mercury emissions in the US. ocean acidification, disrupting the food chain, loss of species, decimating its habitats. And this is just the beginning in terms of the cascading side effects, because side effects yield further side effects. We have to consider the cost of environmental cleanup, medical costs related to health issues arising from these side effects, the loss of plant and animal diversity, the cost of maintaining a war footing to secure sources of fossil fuels. In the US, since 2000, we spent about $6 trillion alone. What does that mean? The inability to otherwise invest in healthcare, childcare, education, investment, new technologies. The fire we domesticated 1.5 million years ago is now all-consuming, from the hills of California to the Australian bush to the forests of the Amazon, even the slow cooking of our seas. It's no longer a controlled burn. So for the first time in 1.5 million years, we can finally wean ourselves off our dependence upon fire and the use of combustion-based technologies, perfecting our power production. Through our growing understanding and respect for natural principles, we are creating technologies that produce no side effects: solar, wind, tidal, geothermal, and others. Just as there are no side effects in nature, there's no waste products as well. Humans alone have the intelligence to ignore or try to act contrary to natural laws. As Buckminster Fuller said, the opposite of nature is impossible. As a consequence, our species alone produce waste as a side effect of our imperfect technologies. I give you the forest floor. On a typical forest floor, you've got leaves and limbs, branches raining down, animals die and decay, their excrement is deposited, but none of it's considered waste, and all of it's considered essential. Bacteria break it down and reduce it to elemental form to be drawn up as nourishment, again, by plant life, in an uninterrupted cycle. Again, no side effects, no waste. Now, the treatment of human waste and wastewater imperfectly worked out by man. An Associated Press investigation found that 270 million pounds of pharmaceutical residue is dumped every year into the waterways of the United States, many of which serve as drinking water for millions of people. Most of the drugs, about 70% of what we consume, pass through the body unused, and they're discharged into our water systems. Many of the more than 4,000 prescription meds used for human and animal health will ultimately find their way into the environment. Antibiotics, anticonvulsants, antidepressants, mood stabilizers, sex hormones. 2 trillion pounds of animal waste generated by poultry and livestock operations is laced with hormones and antibiotics. These two, they're going to make their way into our estuaries and groundwater and our bodies. Add to this the chemical cocktail, the effluents from household and business sinks, toilets, industrial runoff, petroleum products, strong acids. And while chlorine does effectively kill most pathogens in the water, this toxic chemical is not removed before consumption. In addition, in the US, we have to consider the 75,000, 85,000 chemicals manufactured that are neither tested nor regulated. As an example, the Philly municipal drinking water was found to contain over 50 carcinogenic chemicals, including pharmaceuticals and personal care products. And Philly is just an example of most major cities throughout the United States. I might say that New York City might be the exception. They're getting their water through an aqueduct from the Catskills. So it's relatively clean, quite surprisingly. Now, our municipal water treatment systems, while effectively neutralizing most pathogens, aren't built to remove most of the effluents and none of the pharmaceuticals. Again, wastewater system or natural laws imperfectly worked out by man. But there is a better way. Let's take our lessons from nature. This is the Eco Machine, a natural wastewater treatment system at the Omega Institute, a program center located in Rhinebeck, New York. The Eco Machine is an example of universal principles which are perfect in nature, perfectly worked out by us. And by the way, as a side note, this building and its systems is run by solar, heated and cooled using geothermal. It captures rainwater for all of its use in the bathrooms and fountains throughout the building. This system is designed to purify up to 57,000 gallons of what we commonly refer to as wastewater. Water that flows from Omega's kitchen, showers, toilets. What you see is a photo of 4 cement basins, each measuring 50 square feet. These basins receive the wastewater. Now, instead of being filled with soil, they're filled instead with gravel. Planted in the gravel are bulrushes, cattails, sedges, along with whatever seeds that birds and the wind deposit over time, along with, most importantly, bacteria, which is initially introduced into the system, but that over time they have flourished and established their own unique, complex, balanced community. So instead of the plants drawing its nourishment from the soil, the basins are filled with wastewater. And the bacteria break down what we call the wastewater into more elemental form, as happens in nature, which is then drawn up by the plants as nourishment. The water then continues its cleaning journey into an indoor lagoon. 2 of the photos are of the lagoon. The third is of yours truly in the Omega Center for Sustainable Living, teaching a biomimicry class to school kids. So within 36 hours of having flushed the toilet through a system of artificial wetlands and indoor lagoon of tropical plants shown here, the water is purified, returns to its natural state without the use of chemicals of any kind, then reintroduced into the underground aquifer from where it was initially drawn. The hydrologic loop is complete, in full respect and in recognition of natural law. Universal principles, perfect in nature, perfectly worked out by man, no side effects. So my having heard the reports that cattails in the wild were known to pull some chemicals out of lake and pond water, I approached Dr. Emery Rossi Marshall on the Cary Institute of Ecosystem Studies Board to conduct a test on the wastewater entering our eco machine. We tested for the presence of 17 pharmaceuticals, including 7 varieties of antibiotics, antidepressants, anti-seizure medication, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, DEET, tylosin. Of the 17 chemicals we tested for, we found 16 entering the system in measurable amounts. Halfway through the natural water purification system, however, they could no longer be found. They'd been broken down and effectively removed from the water. Now, further studies required to learn about the fate of these chemicals, and that work is being done with other similar systems. So now we go to diet and the myth of side effects. Our entire approach to food and diet is based upon an unquestioned assumption that undermines our health. Even authorities on nutrition misunderstand one of the most fundamental aspects about diet and health, and a lot of people, including macrobiotics, can fall into this trap as well. So we've evolved over hundreds of thousands of generations under conditions of natural sunlight, clean, pure water, and adulterated whole foods. Environmental influences that range over such a vast span of time have shaped us, both inside and out, like the hands of a sculptor. We can safely assume that the very essence of who we are has been defined by this relationship. Any deviation from this natural order invites a measure of stress and eventually disease. And that this deviation is not just with diet, but it's what other influences we are taking in from the environment. We need to recognize that all animals in their natural habitats evolve with foods perfectly suited for their needs to maintain health and natural resistance. Bees have their nectar, deer have their browse, birds have their seeds and berries. Unlike most human diets, every single food an animal eats in the wild is completely suited for it. It benefits it in countless ways, and most importantly, it harms it in none. That is to say, there are no side effects from the foods they eat. The modern dietary approach is to justify eating a food because it contains 1 or 2 ingredients considered to be essential for health. Atkins, Pritikin, Paleo, Keto, they're all based upon this false assumption, and they inevitably, over time, fail. They will address people's needs at the time. If they are deficient in one way or another, that diet they've been attracted to will redress an imbalance. But over time, I believe that they eventually fail. The body simply won't have it. In the body's wisdom, cravings eventually give way to binges, and the diets are abandoned because the body will insist on and will seek out the nutrition that's been denied through restrictive eating regimens. Based upon the belief that we can justify eating a food because it contains one or two ingredients considered essential for health, we could justify eating almost anything, because you'll find something, always find something in practically any item that's considered essential for health. No other animal eats this way. No other animal suffers from the side effects from eating this way. Just an example, and we bring this up often, meat is recommended for its protein. As with foods recommended for human consumption that aren't really suitable for health, meat comes with its own list of so-called side effects. Okay, we start with overcooked meat. It produces HCAs and PAHs, which are chemicals formed when muscle meat is cooked using high temperatures. They've been found to be mutagenic. That is, they cause changes in DNA that may increase the risk of cancer. Undercooked meat, risk of E. coli, salmonella, listeria, trichinosis, or toxoplasmosis infections. Too much meat contributes to type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, stroke, and certain cancers. So the advice is, don't undercook your meat, don't overcook your meat, don't eat too much meat, but eat meat, because it's one source of protein. This doesn't sound like a suitable food. Improper diet yields side effects. Milk, recommended for its calcium. As with all foods recommended for human consumption that aren't suitable for us, it comes with its own list of side effects, which include Crohn's disease, allergies, asthma, ear infections, colic and constipation, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, various cancers from breast cancer to prostate. That is to say, side effects of an imperfect diet. Just as with all other forms of life, foods suited for human consumption have no side effects, which is why mother's milk provides complete nutrition to the infant, and why cow's milk provides complete nutrition to the calf, no side effects. As we select foods perfectly suited for human consumption, a plurality of illnesses will respond favorably, again, to the exact same corrective measures, and those stresses will begin to diminish across the board simultaneously. So why do we consume organic foods over non-organic foods? It may seem like an obvious question with an obvious answer. This is a key consideration when making dietary changes, yet it's almost always overlooked. The most common answer to this question is, I want to eliminate pesticides, fungicides, herbicides from my diet. And those are great reasons to choose organic over conventionally grown foods. But a key discovery about plants grown in healthy, vibrant soil seems to have been lost, even among those advocating for organically grown foods, including those in the macrobiotic community. The concern about ingesting chemicals from fruits and vegetables was not the first cause in the origins of the organic food movement. Albert Howard was a soil scientist working for the British Crown in the early to middle 20th century. He was stationed in India and the surrounding region to look after the cultivation of the government's tobacco, tomatoes, corn, rice, and other cash crops, including livestock. While stationed there, he observed that forests, with their high demand for nutrients, never required dressings of fertilizer to keep them healthy and productive. And he noticed that roadside hedges, the neglected roadside hedges, never required blankets of chemical sprays to keep them disease and pest free. While he was there, he was introduced to a composting system based upon how vegetation composts and decays on a typical forest floor. It's a system naturally rich with microbial life and providing an example of natural principles perfectly worked out by man that Walter Russell alluded to. Locals called the composting system the Andori system. Now, it's important to understand and appreciate that just like the human biome, which we're only just now discovering, plays a fundamental role in human health, the soil biome plays an equally important role in determining the health of the plants that draw their nourishment from the soil. As an example, 1 cubic foot of fertile topsoil was found to contain 40,000 living visible animals, from mites and springtails to spiders, ants, wasps, worms. And 1 single ounce, about a tablespoon of soil, contained over 1 mile of fungus and more bacteria than you're going to find men, women, and children on the planet. This represents a diverse, interdependent community. It's a web of life we're only just now beginning to understand and appreciate. When we apply artificials, chemicals to this living soil, the nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and other chemicals, we literally burn the life out of the soil and turn it into a wasteland of dead, inert dirt. Good for only anchoring a plant, but not really nourishing it, except maybe for a few trace minerals. Howard, who would later be knighted for his work, applied dressings of this living compost to raise the commercial crops. He eventually observed that the plants nourished by this soil naturally resisted disease. He exposed his crops to blights that were infecting crops in surrounding farms. His plants remained disease-free. At the same time, in India, 3 highly infectious diseases, septicemia, rinderpest, and foot and mouth disease, were plaguing surrounding herds of cattle. Howard introduced the diseased cattle to his own herd that was being nourished by grasses grown in the composted soil. He made sure they nuzzled each other nose to nose, and secretions from the diseased cattle made contact with his own, yet the diseases wouldn't take, and his herds remained disease-free. He further observed that the people employed at the farms, and who also enjoyed the foods nourished in the composted soil, also seemed free of disease. He realized that plants, animals, and humans naturally resist disease by virtue of their own health. He went on to inspire J.I. Rodale, Lady E. Balfour, and the beginnings of the organic food movement throughout the planet. So as important as it is to avoid ingesting herbicides, fungicides, pesticides on our foods, the fundamental importance of eating foods grown in their proper soil is that it provides a high degree of natural immunity to the plants nourished by the soil, then to the animals and people nourished by that vegetation. So even when practicing a macrobiotic diet, yes, maybe we're eating organic food, but what is the quality of the soil in which it's grown? And is it really passing on its disease-resistant properties to us? Does health begin with what's on our dinner plate, or the complex microbial soil life that nurtured the plants that ended up on our dinner plate? Now, this is a ridiculously oversimplified illustration of the natural farming cycle. In a nutshell, seeds are sown in nourishing soil and are harvested at maturity. Dressings of composted crop residue, other organic matter are applied throughout the season in order to return to the soil what's been taken up by crops. But what happens when we create a break in the natural lifestyle of farming, which is predicated upon natural principles, and introduce instead chemicals as a substitute for natural manures, compost, crop residue, and other organic soil amendments? So I randomly selected a spot in the United States, a bioregion of the United States, the Susquehanna River Basin, Chesapeake Bay. Natural farm inputs and natural soil amendments are removed in the farming upstream, replaced with chemical fertilizers, mainly nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, although 29 fertilizers in one study tested positive for 22 toxic heavy metals. On the left is the Chesapeake Bay. On the right is runoff from agricultural lands and hog farms upriver, which flows into the bay and then into the Atlantic. So natural farm inputs and natural soil amendments are removed, replaced with chemical fertilizers. I want to look at just the partial side effects of just one of the chief elements, nitrogen, in that one isolated region, probably the most innocuous of all ingredients in terms of fertilizers. So we've disrupted the natural farming cycle. We plug in nitrogen in the bioregion of the Chesapeake Bay. What happens? Let's look at the nature of side effects. Right away, you introduce nitrogen, and there's I'm going to point out some of these. There's an awful lot to read. The appearance of thousands of square miles of oxygen-deprived dead zones in the coastal waterways. A drop in organic matter releases carbon into the atmosphere. Killing off of diverse soil ecology, which lowers the quality of nutrition for the crops. Contamination of underground aquifers. It kills off the striped bass population, blue crab population, oyster beds, shrimp. Increase in algae blooms. Nitrogen introduction alone means the nitrification of wells, which causes blue baby syndrome, which is a heart defect that they're born with, and nitrosamines in adult digestive tracts. But this is just the beginning of side effects. They yield their own. So I'm just going to follow a couple of paths, because honestly, I'd be here all day and we'd need some kind of computer modeling to really show you the devastating impact of simply introducing nitrogen. So killing off of diverse soil ecology, which lowers the quality of nutrition by the crops. What this does, lowered immune response invites pathogens to feed off of the weakened and decaying tissue. The nitrogen and companion chemicals kill off the vital soil population, rendering an active living microbial community to inert dirt. That lowers the resistance of the crops, which in turn invites pathogens to feed off of the weakened and decaying tissue. That's their duty. It's their duty to remove it. That happens in the human body as well. That's their role in life. And it's fundamental, it's vital, and it's a positive role that positively affects all living things. We've compromised the natural farming cycle. We've compromised the health of those crops. Through our own negligence, our own ignorance, we've lowered the natural immunity of those crops and invited in the role of pathogens. So we have a choice. We can either return to the source of the problem, or we can declare all-out war on the forces of nature, the laws of which we cannot violate, and a war we cannot win. So what's our response? Application of herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. But nature is not to be outdone. It triggers mutation and adaptation of pathogens, requiring ever more toxic chemical applications. Mutation and adaptation is positive. We benefit by it. We've evolved through it. It's just that plants they'll find ways around it through reproduction. And pathogens, which can reproduce on the order of millions per day, will become basically naturally resistant over time. So it triggers this mutation and adaptation to pathogens, requiring ever more toxic chemical reactions. Again, our response, we can go back to the source of the problem or not. What you can't see here is what we do instead is the introduction of genetically modified seed that either secretes its own pesticides or is resistant to Roundup-ready pesticides. What are the side effects from that? Killing beneficial insect populations, loss of plant and animal diversity, genetic drift, which crossbreeds with non-GM seed, including organic, creation of super weeds and super viruses, extinction of seed varieties, soil toxicity, it leaches into the groundwater, it's consumed by aquatic life. It goes on and on. Just through the introduction of nitrogen, this is a limited view of the cascading side effects that we have created. So by introducing it, loss of soil fertility, loss of plant vitality, lower resistance in crops, application of pesticides and fungicides, soil erosion, nitrification of wells, increase in algae blooms, loss of striped bass, crabs, oyster beds, bottom-dwelling sea life, fish migrating away from the Chesapeake Bay, decimation of the fishing and tourist industry, which leads to increasing unemployment and its pressure upon families and communities and social support systems, contamination of underground aquifers. The list is basically endless. Now here's the bad news. We can't fix side effects. I mean, how do you fix blue baby syndrome? Corrective surgery, if and when successful. How do you fix the decimation of the fishing industries and the tearing apart of the social fabric of families and communities, maybe with food stamps, soup kitchens, unemployment checks for a while? How do you fix the cancers triggered by, say, Ready Roundup that's applied in conjunction with the use of genetically modified seed? How do you fix the extinction of seed varieties? How do you fix the genetic drift of genetically modified seed? You can't go back. Once you cause these problems, it's not something you can simply take off the shelf. We can't fix these side effects, although you wouldn't know that by how we react. Just in this one isolated area of the Chesapeake Bay, this one seemingly harmless chemical, millions of state and federal dollars are spent annually. Thousands of people apply themselves in a futile attempt to address all of these seemingly distinct social and environmental concerns. And it basically amounts to triage, assigning degrees of urgency to address the most present concerns. And this is a reason why, looking at this, it doesn't seem that any one problem seems insurmountable, but that all of them together are overwhelming, and they have to be taken together. So the bad news is we can't fix what we mistakenly believe are side effects. The good news is we don't have to. Return to the cause. Stop the hemorrhaging. Break the initial links. Return to the scene of the crime, basically. Link up the natural farming life cycle again. When you do that, all of these seemingly intractable problems will begin to diminish simultaneously across the board. Again, although we compartmentalize our problems and we create the illusion that they're separate and distinct from each other, nature does not. But there will be side effects. The reestablishment and health of our bee colonies, for one, as well as increased diversity of species of flora and fauna. Again, we don't have to choose our battles. We don't have to adapt an adversarial approach to natural processes. We simply need to shift our point of view. So what is a person to do? And I have an hour-and-a-half lecture that I've had to reduce to 40 minutes. So I will be able to touch upon most of this. Enjoy a diet that supports sustainable farming practices, which promotes the health and vitality of the soil, plants, animals, humans. Adapt a plant-based diet. Minimize or eliminate altogether foods that are not perfectly suited for human consumption. Meat, dairy, food additives, preservatives, colorings. Again, they're easy to identify because they come with their own side effects. Find your passion points. Organize with like-minded people. And I can't even read his quote, so I won't. I'm going to go right through them. Effect change, even if it feels at first to be of little consequence. Even incremental changes in habit and lifestyle can produce profound changes over time. As is commonly understood among mariners, the shift to just a few degrees at the beginning of any voyage is going to mean a vastly different direction, position, and destination far out at sea. So don't underestimate the power and influence of our everyday choices. Understand and appreciate that it's impossible to violate natural laws. When misunderstood or ignored, they violate us. When understood and applied, a range of physical and social ills will begin to diminish across the board simultaneously. And basically, that's what I got for you. I don't know if people have.
Wow, that was amazing.
I
Wow.
don't know how to get out of here.
Let's see, I can get you out.
You are screen sharing. I don't want to. Go away. Damn. Okay. Well, anyway.
Wait a minute, we can do this. How
How
do we get out? There you are.
do I get out of it? Maybe I right click. No, that doesn't work. I thought right click. Yes.
Do
it
you
did.
want? this
Yay.
step? There
All
you
right.
go. You did it. You did it.
Go
Hey,
away. Go away. Okay.
Jeffrey, that's excellent. You're a really good presenter, and that's incredible information.
Thank you.
Boy,
I have so much more I'd like to share.
yeah, yeah. Maybe we will if you want to. Maybe we can do a expanded
You know,
version.
Yeah. I could leave you, I don't know how much time you have left.
None,
So I can leave you, can I leave you with a final note of thought?
absolutely, of course.
So whenever we speak of evolution, you know, we make the mistake of restricting its meaning to the past tense, something that has occurred. And kind
Jeff,
of
what
comes,
happened to your picture? Where'd you go?
oh, sorry. Let me finish this. I'm not sure, but rather
Okay.
indicative than I will. Evolution. What comes to mind is fossilized evidence, you know, things that are old, partial, trapped in stone until we expose it to sunlight, brush it clean with a brush. These fragments of evolution often tell the story of a species of life that died out ages ago, having been unable to respond to the social and environmental pressures. But I don't think we should restrict our understanding of evolution to past events. We have to consider future possibilities. Although it's written in the Bible, which is a religious text shared by Jews, Muslims, and Christians, that God created man in his image, I can't help but think that over the past 3,000 years, during its travels from mother tongue to modern language, something subtle was lost in the translation, and the words originally written might have said that God is creating man in his image, because humans are quite simply a work in progress. So today, for what I showed and a lot of other reasons, we find ourselves at a critical juncture in our evolution where technological achievements have until recently outpaced our understanding of science and the side effects behind them. After all, it was easier to burn a piece of coal over the past 1,000 years to understand the science behind it. Where our technological evolution continues to outpace our social evolution that's required to embrace these new technologies and use them for the common good. AI is a perfect example. We don't get that under control, we're screwed. So the challenges facing us today are not technical in nature, they're social and more importantly, personal. So I think it was inevitable that humans as an evolving species arrive at this point in time, at this juncture, with these problems. The question remains if we'll be able to navigate these waters and make it successfully to the other side. Or will our bones be reduced to fossilized evidence, you know, of a species that chose basically not to respond quickly enough to the environmental and social pressures that we ourselves have brought upon ourselves. And quite frankly, that remains to be seen.
Mine. Hit your video. Do you know how to do that?
Where are we? Where are we? Oh, you know what? I hit something.
There you go.
There we are.
Yeah, you're back.
You can look at my pretty face.
Yeah. All right. Well, you put a lot into that presentation, didn't you?
It was dense. My apologies.
It was well done. What can I say?
And you know, I don't know, oversimplify diet and the effects on health. I mean, obviously it's there and it's important. And you know, it's been part of my life for the past 50 years. But we take in nutrition through what we breathe, what we see, what we hear, what we think. And again, we talk about organic quality food, but I really do feel one of the pieces is under address is the quality of the soil that's grown the food and the immune, the disease resisting properties of the food that makes its way into our markets. And I'm not sure that's really there. Sir Robert Howard, J.R. Rodale, who most people might know, was a bookseller at the time. And it was Howard's work that inspired him to start the whole organized organic agriculture movement in the United States. I spoke with Anthony Rodale, his grandson, great-grandson, who was very much involved in the Institute. He acknowledged Sir Albert Howard's influence on Rodale. What he did not understand was the significance of Howard's work and the disease-resistant properties of food grown in quality soil. So that message has been dropped almost completely. And I think we need to reclaim that. And I think we'll find that the foods we eat will have a much more powerful effect on our health.
Are you optimistic?
Of that, I am. I really am concerned about AI. And this is not something that's years into the future. I would say within 300 to 600 days, 1 to 2 years, we're going to be thrown into the new Tower of Babel. We're not going to be able to discern truth from fiction, and we're screwed. Democracy requires the ability to do that. So I don't know. I really don't know. I'm thinking about back to Earth movement. I'm shutting off my technology fairly soon.
Well, I'm glad we caught you before you did.
That's kind of you.
All right, then. Well, remains just for me to thank you, and I do. Really, you gave a lot there.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for putting up with it. It was 40 minutes of fast talking.
Yeah.